Romance, narcissism, invisibility. What could possibly go wrong? Hey freaks and friends, welcome to the 14th entry of the John Carpenter review series. Today we're looking at what I think is one of his most unfairly overlooked films among John Carpenter's filmography. We're taking a look-see at the visually ambitious film from 1992, Memoirs of an Invisible Man. Memoirs of an Invisible Man came out in 1992 and stars Chevy Chase, Daryl Hannah, Sam Neill, Michael McKean, and Stephen Tobolowsky. Screenplay for this was written by Robert Collector, Dana Olson, and William Goldman, and it was based off of the novel of the same name, Memoirs of an Invisible Man, by H.F. Saint. And funny enough, this movie was originally intended to be directed by Ivan Reitman of Ghostbusters fame, but him and Chevy Chase, they didn't get along so well, so he ended up stepping out of the project, and Carpenter came in. And that worked out in Carpenter's favor because, one, he said that he always wanted to work with Chevy Chase, and he'd also always wanted to do his own Invisible Man project. But to be fair, he did say these in the 1992 vintage interview for this film. So for all we know, that could have just been that movie hype. The plot to this one is a pretty simple premise. We have Chevy Chase playing a sort of narcissistic, almost underachieving sort of stockbroker. He ends up going out to the gentleman's club and has a few too many drinks, and he has an important little thing to go to the next day. It's some sort of presentation about some sort of nuclear theory or something like that, some sort of physics stuff that's kind of over my head. And in his sort of hungover state, he's like, yeah, I gotta go take a nap. So he goes and takes a nap. During his slumber, there is a freak accident in the laboratory that causes this little explosion, but it wasn't really an explosion. It was more so sort of a freak reaction of sorts, and it'll make sense more, especially if you watch this film. But what ultimately ensues is an invisible Chevy Chase. We can see him at times, but no one else can. And it's played for laughs in a way, but it's also a very kind of serious film. It almost has a sort of Hitchcockian thriller, almost like a North by Northwest kind of feel to it, but mixed with the whole idea of invisibility. And it plays into sort of the downside of invisibility, something that a lot of people don't look at. Like when we think about invisibility, we think, hey, what are going to be the perks of invisibility? This one shows you kind of what the downsides are, and I thought that was a pretty interesting take there. And throughout the film, he's trying to sort of find a way to evade these secret agents, the sort of CIA characters in this film. Led greatly by Sam Neill, who is just freaking phenomenal in here. He ultimately hides out of his friend's country house, where it turns out that his friend and a few other people are coming to visit, one of which is sort of his love interest that he stood up. I mean, it's kind of what happens when you turn invisible. You can't really catch a date that way. But Daryl Hannah is his love interest in here, and he sort of kind of lets her know after a while, hey, I'm invisible, and there's a little bit of a love story going on there, so you can sort of see that there is sort of that attempt at getting a sort of a Hitchcock blonde in this film, which I thought was a pretty cool little effort. I don't know if that was intentional. And I almost wonder if that Hitchcockian sort of element was an intended thing here with either the novel or the film. But the film all culminates in a showdown between Chevy Chase and Sam Neill. Again, we can barely see Chevy Chase throughout the film. Kind of a convoluted explanation for this plot, but the story is simple, but all the inner workings of it are a little bit scientific, if you will. Overall, I think the story is a pretty good one. Again, sort of taking the downside of invisibility and not being seen. It sort of exposes the dangers of being an invisible man, which is something that I think a lot of us probably overlook, no pun intended, when thinking about, shit, if I was invisible, I would do this, this, and that. Yeah, but you'd also probably get hit by a car because no one can fucking see you. The way they captured the effects of the invisibility, this was like using the very early 90s sort of computer graphics, which involved fucking taking the image and running it through the computer, doing all this crazy stuff with it. It's all over my head. I don't know how none of that works. But they put in like these little blue lenses on Chevy, put him in like the blue screen suit and all that fun stuff, and at times they painted him black just to sort of capture his shadow and stuff. Just the way the effects were handled in this, I think it was a hell of an interesting process, but what I'm trying to get at with that is that the effects, I think, for being 30 years old, they still hold up pretty damn well, and it looks better than some of the modern effects that we get in something like this. Another particular effect that stands out is the building that he goes to for the scientific demonstration. When that building is shown to be partially invisible, it looks like it's broken. It looks like something out of a goddamn nightmare. But you've got fragments of it. You can see like part of the ceiling, part of the floor, a little bit of the wall, but the whole building's intact. I thought that was pretty cool, and I don't know, it was just so freaking cool. The whole man on the run story, the trying to evade authority and giving the middle finger, as it were, to Sam Neill's character, I thought was a fun little thing to include there. It again plays into that Hitchcockian sort of suspense there. Again, take a look at North by Northwest. Throughout that film, Cary Grant's on the run. His thing was more of a case of misunderstanding and mistaken identity. This is really lack of identity. And that's something I think is, I don't know if that was intended to have in here, but I thought that was an interesting sort of arc for Chevy Chase's character. Being sort of this narcissistic guy and having to deal with becoming invisible, becoming nobody. I mean, it's got to be the worst nightmare for anybody who's even the slightest bit narcissistic there. And I don't know, just the whole idea of being that he already was so stuck on himself. He never really had time to really get these meaningful relationships and friendships. And as soon as he turns invisible and the government guys are after him, it's not like a whole lot of people really know where he is or what he likes to do. I mean, they've got some of his recreational routines down. I don't know, there's just something interesting about that. Like, you're so stuck on yourself that you lack so much identity, and then you ultimately lose that identity, mostly in a visual sense. There's just something really interesting about that. Chemistry, too, between Daryl Hannah and Chevy Chase, I thought was also pretty okay. I was expecting it to be pretty damn cringy and just really stiff. It turns out I think that they did have this sort of, their sort of relationship and attraction seemed a little bit rushed. I mean, when I first watched it on the first watch, I thought, oh, these two had a fling. No, they're making out within like 10 minutes of knowing each other. But I thought it was, again, a pretty okay chemistry between the two. It didn't feel like it was too forced. It didn't feel too... I mean, it felt a little bit rushed, but it didn't feel too forced or anything. And I think that they were pretty serviceable as a sort of an item for the end of this film. Again, sort of like a Cary Grant and Grace Kelly kind of deal, or Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly. Again, the Hitchcock thing is something that I see just kind of all throughout this film. I don't know if that was intended or not, but I can see it. Get it? Sam Neill plays the CIA sort of villain. He's having a lot of fun with this role, you can tell, and I really like that he showed up in here. I don't know, I feel like some other people could have done that role pretty okay, but this was actually, I think, a pretty cool starting point for Sam Neill in the John Carpenter pantheon. And his character's a real piece of work, too, because we come to learn that his character is involved with all kinds of different CIA mishandlings of diplomatic affairs, where he may or may not be linked to various people, defectors, or oppositions to sort of the Western values, just sort of falling from high levels. It's just one of those things that's like, that's not going to come back in any plot-relevant way, is it? No, man, fuck. When that does, though, I thought that was pretty fucking great. Just the way he gets his comeuppance there. I was on the second watch around when it was replaying the committee hearing where they're talking to him and questioning him about that, where I'm like, oh shit, I see the irony there now. That was fucking great. And that is kind of one thing about this film too. It does sort of warrant a rewatch, because you have not only, again, the sort of Hitchcock nods, but you even have like little Carpenter nods there, or Carpenter related nods at least. The science building that freaking has the crazy shit going on there is in a town called Santa Mira. It's not the first time some factory or building industrial thing went fucking berserk in Santa Mira, California. Just saying. And there's a reference to Bodega Bay, which was where the Birds was shot and where the Fog was shot, so that's another nice little nod there. And I think using the California setting is definitely showing that John Carpenter himself as a person is just starting to get more comfortable out there. It's just a lot of fun to be had in this film, honestly. And you get some bits of humor. Like, you get Chevy Chase when he's invisible trying to eat, and he can't see his hands, so he doesn't know how to grab the tongs or the freaking chopsticks. And when he sees the food in his stomach, like, because that's what you see. You just see the food go down and start settling in his stomach. Again, that effect was fucking crazy. There's all kinds of pretty cool visual effects in here. And again, they hold up pretty damn well. But it's funny when you see him throwing up his food, and later on he's talking about... he's ordering over the phone some food. He's wanting some bouillon cubes, preferably clear. My doctor says I need to be on a clear diet, because I don't think I would be able to see all that food going down my stomach and shit. No, that would just be too much, probably. You also have when he's escaping his apartment, the CIA guys come there and they're trying to find him. They're using this freaking spray paint to try and, if it hits him, they're gonna find him. But he sneaks out, and this is where the whole Jimmy Stewart thing kind of came in for me. He's just trying to climb over the railing to get out of his apartment, go down the stairwell, and he's just sort of hanging there, and you get that freaking shot down at him, and you just see him kind of hanging, and it does kind of remind me of something out of Vertigo now that I think about it. But, you have him just holding on for dear life. The butt of the rifle hits his finger, so he slips, and now he's holding on to the bottom part of the fucking railing. A CIA guy kind of steps back, steps on his fingers. It's just pretty damn goofy. I mean, a lot of there's a good amount of humor in here. I don't want to go too all into that, because this is a film that I think you really got to see, get it, to really enjoy and realize it's not as bad as everyone says it is. I mean, this film upon release was a critical and box office failure, which, I don't know, I see that as kind of a little bit upsetting, honestly, because I feel like it's just a misunderstood film, but then again, I could have that I'm a John Carpenter fan bias. And to be fair, this is also a first-time watch for me in the last couple days. So there's sort of that, well, no, this is new to me. So I kind of like that. But it's a film that I think held up pretty damn well. It is fun to see Michael McKean in here. I mean, I know him mostly from This Is Spinal Tap and Lenny and Squiggy. So it's nice to see him in here. He was just a lot of fun in Airheads, too. He's one of those guys that whenever I see him pop up, it's like, hell yeah! Oh, and he was the police chief in Little Nicky also. But yeah, Michael McKean, it was fun to see him in here, just playing kind of that, just a dickheadish fake friend, bro. And the fucking British guy in here, fucking, I can't remember his name, but he's trying to seduce Daryl Hannah. He's drinking a little bit, starts to cry, and tries to force himself on her, and Chevy Chase is in the bedroom, and he's invisible at this point, obviously. Daryl Hannah's trying to fight him off, and Chevy just grabs him and throws him off of her. And it's funny later, because there's a line where they're talking about her jogging across the beach, and Michael McKean says something about, let's just hope nobody tries to get her, hope she's okay. And the British guy says, oh, don't worry about her, she's got the strength of an ox. I do want to say real quick, too, about the climax for this film. It is pretty damn great, because you have, again, a high sort of altitude sort of thing going on where they're going on top of a construction site building, and this is where Sam Neill's poetry comes in. He's sort of walking Chevy Chase to the edge, sort of intimidating him. Hey, if you don't come and sign on with us at the government, we're probably going to have to eliminate you. And you're going to be just our dirty work slave. You're going to be completely off the record, too, for that matter. And that's kind of the whole thing with Sam Neill's character, is like, he's figuring, hey, I can get away. And I mean, I think any government would probably want a fucking Invisible Man agent. Maybe they already do. Chevy Chase kind of uses this moment to outwit him, where the jacket that he's wearing, it had a little bit of dirt stain on it, or I think it was wet cement actually. Yeah, he had the wet cement on his jacket sleeve. So he takes the jacket off and he's just kind of holding it over the edge like so. And Sam Neill is thinking, okay, that's where he's at. And he pretends that he's jumping off, and you know, Sam Neill goes after the coat, falls to his death. Perfect fucking poetry for his character. Again, thinking back to the committee hearings. And of course, at the end of the film, Chevy Chase and Daryl Hannah do get away, and they go to live this sort of new life. And luckily for her, she makes documentaries, so as a documentary producer, she can live anywhere she wants. So they retire to a beautiful, I think it's Switzerland, a beautiful little country home on the Swiss Alps, I guess. But it was a pretty solid ending, and you know, you'd almost think that fucking Chevy Chase would lose the invisibility throughout the film, that he'd go back to normal. I'm going to tell you guys right out the gate, no, he does not go back to normal. But you can apply like makeup to his face to sort of make him appear, and we get some humor out of that. One is pretty tasteful, the other is distasteful in some way. Some people aren't going to really like it, so that's probably why some people are going to, especially today, give this an extra thumbs down. It was the 90s, guys. Just fucking accept it as art of its time. I'm not saying that I condone it, but you just gotta fucking accept it for the time period. It was funny. I don't like it any more than you do. But anyway, moving on. Well, taking a look into the sort of the mood and atmospherics, this is a little tricky because this has that humor element going on, but I will say that there is sort of that there is that Hitchcockian tension. Again, I am not going to let go of that damn fact right there. I think the film is pretty well paced. It does kind of give us some time to breathe when he is at the country house. But anytime that Sam Neill's on the screen, that tension ramps up, and it's very rhythmic, I think. And also the way that the film is sort of bookended almost. Like, it starts with the invisible Chevy Chase talking about, hey, I'm the Invisible Man, this is my experience. And throughout the film, we sort of get this narration, and it's one of those where, at the end of his narration, the third act really fucking kicks into gear. So I thought that was a pretty cool little way they used that device there. The score for this was composed by Shirley Walker, and I think she did a pretty good score. It's nothing really stand out, especially among like the Carpenter pantheon, but it does have some pretty cool beats. They're not too particularly memorable. I mean, the one that plays during the main menu of the Blu-ray, I can't even hum it off the top of my head, but it was serviceable enough. It wasn't too distracting throughout the film. I think that she did a pretty good job. And credit to her, she was apparently one of the only working female composers in her time. So I thought that was pretty damn cool on her end there. And the cinematography by William Fraker was also pretty good. It's, again, it does feel like a Carpenter film when you look at it. I feel like him and Carpenter were pretty in tune in a lot of ways. But there wasn't anything too stand out. Again, you had sort of the Hitchcock echoing shots there. But that's really the only standout thing I could really think of with the cinematography. But very well shot film. Again, when you consider all the fucking special effects too, the visual effects, this movie's worth checking out for that alone. But before we move on completely, we're going to take a look at what is one of my favorite parts of these Carpenter reviews. That is going to be the frequent Carpenter collaborators. We're starting with our man Sam Neill. This is his first of 2 appearances. You guys know the next one he's going to be in be the one after the next one, In the Mouth of Madness. Is he going to do better in that one than he did here? Personally, I think so. But Sam Neill, his start with John Carpenter here, I thought was pretty solid. We also have Donald Lee. He had previously appeared as Eddie Lee in Big Trouble in Little China. He just plays a cab driver in here, and I recognized him right away. I'm like, I would not have suspected you were in here. And I did go on Letterboxd just to double check and make sure I wasn't fucking gaslighting myself there. And to the Carpenter cameo, this is where he's going, I think, under the name Rip Hate. He plays a helicopter pilot, of course, in the third act. And yeah, that's kind of Carpenter's thing. He's a helicopter pilot. I'd fucking be flexing a pilot's license if I had one like that. And here's some other notable actors who are in here, but they're not really Carpenter collaborators. I just thought they were interesting ones to notice in here. We have Ellen Albertini Dow, and she plays Chevy Chase's neighbor in here. She's this elderly lady. You'll recognize her from The Wedding Singer, most likely. You might recognize her from Patch Adams. It was fun to see her in here. And she was one of those ones that's like, I recognized her right off the bat, and it's like, where the fuck do I know this old lady from? But it was fun to see her in here. And we have Pat Skipper as Morrissey, and he plays Sam Neill's number 2 guy in this film. And we see him in Rob Zombie's Halloween as Mason Strode. So I just thought that was a pretty cool little connection there. At the end of the day, guys, I think John Carpenter's Memoirs of an Invisible Man is an unfairly overlooked film in his catalog. It's one that I think deserves a reappraisal, even if there is some black-brown face in there. All that aside, this film is pretty damn solid. Again, the effects hold up pretty well. It plays like a Hitchcock, but it feels like a Carpenter. I swear, if this movie were made in the 50s, it would have been a humorous Hitchcockian thriller. Well, it would have been done by Hitch, so it fucking... Can you call Hitchcock's work Hitchcockian? Does that make sense? Anyway, if this movie had been made in the 50s, it would have been Jimmy Stewart, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I think it would have been pretty great that way. But this is a film that I think just was a lot of fun. You kind of get laughs, you get some thrills, but it's not sort of like the modern thriller that would play in the same sort of way. But it's a fun film all the same. And at the end of the day, guys, I'm going to be giving Memoirs of an Invisible Man 3.5 surprisingly held up primitive digital effects out of 5. So that was my look at Memoirs of an Invisible Man, guys. This was a first time watch for me, even if I did watch it a couple times. First time visiting this one. I was really not looking forward to this one. I was kind of loathing it. I found myself enjoying it, honestly, and I had a blast with it. But let me know down there, guys. Do you want to see this film? Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Do all the stuff with the icons down there. Let me know your thoughts on the film. Be sure to hit the little bell icon so you don't miss out on any of the other awesome stuff I got going on here. I will see you guys in the next one, when we will be taking a look at Body Bags.